Ferrari breaks the rules of the game in 2026. Steel cylinders, 3D printed engine, and a trick that could end Mercedes' hegemony. What Maranello is cooking up is not just an evolution. It is a silent revolution that can change Formula One forever. Nothing worked. Nothing. From the first race to the last, it was a parade of disappointments. The team did not achieve a single victory. Not one. It finished the season in a humiliating 4th place in the Constructors' Championship, behind McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull, and well below Maranello's historical expectations. The problem was not just one of pace. It was structural. The single-seater, the SF25, had a critical defect: ride height. What seemed like a design innovation on paper was a nightmare on the track. The most visible consequence was experienced at the Chinese Grand Prix, where Lewis Hamilton won the sprint race, only to be disqualified 24 hours later due to excessive skid block wear. That was the definitive alarm signal. Internally, distrust grew. Leclerc was forced to carry the entire weight of the team. He was the only driver to get on the podium for Ferrari. He did it 7 times. Meanwhile, Hamilton, who had arrived at Maranello as the big star signing, finished his first season with 0 podiums. The first time in his entire career that he closed a year without at least a 3rd position. Charles Leclerc put it bluntly, it was an obvious decision, although emotionally hard. Competing 20 more races knowing that the car was not going to improve is a burden that wears down any driver. But the Monegasque took it on with maturity, with his sights set on the future. Hamilton, for his part, maintained public silence for months. He didn't need to speak. His face spoke for him every Sunday. And within the team, those who worked alongside him knew that the Briton was preparing not to fight in 2025, but to lead the total offensive in 2026. The rest of the paddock watched Ferrari with skepticism. But at the Maranello factory, a new technical monster was brewing. A different car. A revolutionary power unit. A project internally called Project 678. While Mercedes and Red Bull were obsessed with finding the next legal trick, Ferrari went another route. A more complex, riskier, but also more lasting path. They did not look for an advantage hidden in the fine print of the regulations. They opted for pure engineering. At the heart of Ferrari's 2026 engine is a decision that defies decades of technical logic in Formula One. Removing aluminum as the main material in the cylinder heads and replacing it with a steel alloy. An alloy that not only includes steel, but also copper and ceramic compounds designed to withstand extreme thermal conditions. Why is this bet so radical? Because aluminum is lighter. Because it is easier to work. Because the entire industry has used it as a standard for more than 3 decades. But steel, although heavier, offers much higher mechanical resistance, allows handling much higher internal pressures, and above all, it withstands extreme combustion temperatures better without deforming. This is not a minor detail. With the new rules of 2026, Formula One requires a new distribution of power. Half of the performance will come from the thermal engine, and the other half from the electrical system. And in that delicate balance, extracting every kilowatt from the combustion engine will be key. That's why Ferrari didn't want to play with the margins. What they were looking for was to create a cylinder head that would endure what no other has endured. High pressures, higher temperatures, higher ignition, more efficiency in the mixture, and all without losing a single gram of structural reliability. But here comes the most important thing: how to make something like this. Ferrari did not resort to traditional casting techniques. What they did was 3D print the engine layer by layer, using a technique called DMLS, direct metal laser sintering. It is a process that melts metal powder with high-power lasers to create structures that are impossible to mold by conventional means. The result is a completely new design, with internal cooling channels that fit to the millimeter, internal aerodynamic geometries to control thermal flows, and material combinations that can only be achieved with additive printing. The collaboration with the AVL firm was key. These Austrian engineers have been the hidden brains behind this structural revolution. A more powerful, more efficient combustion engine can put less pressure on the hybrid system. That means that, while other teams are struggling to complete a lap without running out of battery, Ferrari could have more energy available at key moments, such as corner exit or the end of a straight. Thanks to the extreme thermal control offered by the steel cylinder head, Ferrari can use smaller radiators because the engine dissipates heat more efficiently. This frees up space on the pontoons. And with narrower side pods, the door opens to a sharper, cleaner, more aerodynamic body. This is not an aesthetic improvement. In Formula One, every square centimeter of surface area affects airflow. A car with better aerodynamic efficiency can reduce drag, increased top speed and improved DRS efficiency. All this without touching the flat bottom or the diffuser. The risk now is even greater. Because the new steel head supports more pressure, yes, but it also works in a more demanding thermal and structural range than any previous design. If it breaks, if a crack appears, if the cooling system fails minimally, there is no margin for error. The penalty is direct: abandonment. Furthermore, there is a question that runs through the halls of Maranello. How long will this engine last in real racing conditions? The FIA only allows 4 engines per driver for the entire season. 24 races. There is no room for failure. There is no room for manufacturing errors. Just one problem and the championship could be buried in April. And yet, Ferrari believes this is the only way to win. The only way to make a difference without depending on legal loopholes, like the one exploited by Mercedes and Red Bull with their variable compression system. For Ferrari, the current design is not a gamble. It's a jump. And like every leap, it has 2 possible endings: landing as the dominant team of the new era, or crashing and starting again from scratch. During the second half of 2025, information was leaked that shook the paddock. Both Mercedes and Red Bull had found a way to modify the engine's effective compression ratio without violating any FIA regulations. And it wasn't a marginal improvement. We are talking about a trick that could generate up to 4 tenths per lap on certain circuits. The principle behind the trick is simple. The rule imposed by the FIA states that the maximum engine compression ratio must be measured at ambient temperature. Specifically, the standard indicates that a ratio of 16:1 cannot be exceeded under standard verification conditions. But neither Mercedes nor Red Bull designed their engines to operate in those conditions. What they did was take advantage of the physical behavior of materials at high temperatures. Using metals with different coefficients of thermal expansion, they built components that, once they reach 100 degrees Celsius or more, subtly modify the internal geometry of the combustion chamber. The result: what is a 16:1 chamber when cold? When hot, it has an effective compression of up to 18:1. More compression means more pressure. More pressure means more complete, more efficient combustion. Less unburned mixture residue. Less need to push the hybrid system. And above all, more net power without increasing fuel flow, which in 2026 will be more limited than ever. Ferrari reacted with frustration. Together with Honda and Audi, they submitted a formal request to review the legality of the system. They wanted the FIA to reconsider the measurement method. But the answer was resounding: it is completely legal under current rules. Even a Ferrari engineer in a recent interview put it bluntly: what Mercedes did was smart. There's no other way to describe it. And here the dilemma appears. Ferrari opted for an engine with more structural resistance, more energy density, and more technical complexity. But he did it with the regulations in hand. Mercedes and Red Bull jumped ahead of the gaps. They did not need to change the head material. They didn't print the engine. There were no increased risks. They just used the technical language of the regulations better. According to paddock sources, Mercedes has already reached more than 420 kilowatts, 571 horsepower, in its heat engine. Red Bull would be slightly behind, but within the same range. Ferrari, by comparison, is on more conservative numbers, betting that its more robust engine structure will allow them to grow safely throughout the season. Project 678, the code name for Maranello's new car, will be presented on January 23rd at Fiorano, its private track. But the date is not coincidental. The complete assembly of the car will be completed just 24 hours before. That planning to the limit is not a product of chaos. It's a strategy. Ferrari has opted for heavy alloys in a sport obsessed with saving grams. He has 3D printed critical engine parts, with internal cooling channels impossible to manufacture by conventional methods. It has invested its entire aerodynamic architecture based on thermal control, not wind tunnel aesthetics. It has renounced opportunistic solutions such as the compression trick adopted by Mercedes and Red Bull to base its bet on a simple principle: make something that lasts. That does not depend on a legal loophole. That does not need to be disguised as innovation. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.